Hello, guys, and
Hey.
welcome to the first episode of Poems with Friends. I am Megha, and this is Anurag.
Anurag.
So, today we'll read a poem called Birthday Cake by Paul Goodman. And I have already read this poem before, but Anurag will be reading it for the first time. So, we'll get his fresh reactions on it.
I hope my reactions are as good as the poem.
Yes, let's see. Okay. So, you want to read it?
So, the poem's title is Birthday Cake. Now, isn't it time when the candles on the icing are too many, too many to blow out, too many to count, too many? Isn't it time to give up this ritual? Although the fiery crown fluttering on the chocolate and through the darkened room advancing is still the most loveliest sight among our savage folk that have few festivals. But the thicket is too hot and thick, and isn't it time? Isn't it time where the fires are too many to eat the fire and not the cake, and rip the fires from my teeth as once I had my hot youth? Very nice. I think I still did not capture it yet, but there is a lot of repetition in the.
I'll read it one more time. Birthday cake. Now, isn't it time when the candles on the icing are too many to blow out, too many to count, too many? Isn't it time to give up this ritual? Although the fiery crown fluttering on the chocolate and through the darkened room advancing is still the most loveliest sight among our savage folk that have few festivals. But the thicket is too hot and thick. And isn't it time? Isn't it time where the fires are too many to eat the fire and not the cake, and rip the fires from my teeth as once I had my hot youth? Nice.
I have to say, I still do not understand it. I.
Let's go paragraph by paragraph. I think because I have read it before. So let's talk about the first para. What do you think of it?
I think what it is saying, the general feeling is that I don't know what it's comparing, but literally, I guess the person is just tired year after year, blowing candles that keep on increasing, and the author is like, hey, I think I just want to give up on this ritual altogether.
Right, right. Because now there is no point. So many candles every year. Let's go through the whole thing as a whole first, and then we'll talk about the specific things. So let's go to the second paragraph. So in the first paragraph, the author is basically tired of the birthday ritual. Then in the second paragraph, I think he goes more into imagery, right?
Correct. So here, I guess he's describing the cake, the crown, the chocolate.
So we have the fiery crown. This is the candles, right? On top of the cake.
Hmm. Flittering on the chocolate because they are candles and the fire is still there,
Right.
alight.
So this is the fiery crown fluttering on the chocolate. Fluttering, as you said, because they are candles, so they're fluttering in the wind.
And through
And
the darkened room.
advancing.
Oh, because candles are the only source of light here
Huh.
in
Maybe,
this
yeah.
birthday
It's
room.
it's like a birthday party where someone is bringing the cake through a dark room.
Hmm. And
Is
they're saying that still we are too primitive
right.
to like this is, even though this holds no meaning, there's no value to this, we are so primitive that we deserve this festival. Like, as in, there are not many.
Huh, right. Is still the most loveliest sight among our savage folk that have few festivals. So he's saying that since we don't have any more festivals anymore. So it is something that we still consider very beautiful, and it's the most loveliest sight for us, because it is a moment of celebration for us. And in today's modern society, we anyways don't have many moments to celebrate.
I do have a question here, but I think I'll come back to it later.
The second one, he is looking at the beautiful image. So for me, it's about his flow of feelings, that he was feeling very cynical, but then he was like, oh, but it's so beautiful. And in the end, he was almost disgusted and angry by it. He was like, no, but it is so hot, and isn't it time? There's so much I should, like, he's getting so disgusted by it that he just wants to eat the fire in like a fit of rage and say that. And then that's what he says, and drip the fires from my teeth. So he is creating this very visceral image of that, isn't it time to accept it? Like, even if it is a lovely ritual, isn't it time to accept your like oldness and closeness to death, to just eat the fire and then drip it just like you drip your youth?
So, but the thicket is too hot and thick, and isn't it time, where the fires are too many? I am not sure. Here, I guess what they're saying is that though this ritual is absurd, okay, it's time to eat the fire. I guess be more daring, change things. Like, like this event is happening for so much time that we have to switch it up because we are in a fucked up world. So we have to do things very.
Right. I think that is an interesting perspective. So we were talking about the last paragraph. So the last paragraph, for me, I never thought about it philosophically or intellectually. For me, it was more like the flow of the author's feelings. So in the first para, he was very cynical about why are we doing it, and then in the second para, he was like, oh, but it's so beautiful and we have nothing to celebrate. And in the third paragraph, he almost got like into rage and disgust about why are we doing this? We should just eat the fire, and we should just accept that we are getting so old and we are dropping our hot youth. That rage of against this, like, you're stuck in this kind of society where there is nothing to celebrate or celebrate this, that you have a kind of disgust and rage towards it. What are we even doing? Let's break out of it, kind of. I think it's almost the same as you said, but I never thought of it in a philosophical sense.
You're saying that for the other, it's a clawing feeling internally. Okay,
Yes.
I'm just going through life, I'm about to die, and keep doing the same thing again and again.
Yes, that is also very true. Like, I am going through life doing the same thing. Now there are so many candles, does it even make sense? So towards the end, he almost becomes rageful at that idea.
Oh, so for you, fire was more. It's too hot and thick, and isn't it time?
Like,
Isn't it time?
specifically when he says to eat the fire, that is, I think, when he loses it. It's like to eat the fire. He just puts his head into the cake and eats the fire.
But okay, I think now it's time to go into the poem a little because this is where I also stumble a little when I'm reading a poem because there are these parts where I probably understand the meaning, but I do not understand what if the intended meaning is that. So, for example, the author is saying author, author or author.
Author.
So, is saying, isn't it time where the fires are too many? I don't understand this line because
Fires matlab candles, right? Fires are too many.
isn't it time where the fires are too many? That signifies old age. Isn't it time where the fires are too many to eat the fire and not the cake and drip the fire from my teeth? Oh, so the imagery is that like you savagely
You
eat
savagely
eat
the
a cake, but instead of eat, you are now eating fire.
You're eating fire.
And you're dripping fire. You are just
And
doing that.
Even the image of drip the fire as once from my teeth, it almost feels like if you're dripping fire from your teeth, it feels like it feels savage, but then it also feels like somehow you will lose your teeth. Like an image of losing teeth also comes to mind, right? Because there is fire in your teeth and they're dripping. So
Oh.
that also relates to old age, like a really old person, but there is savageness in it, but there is also a sadness in it. Like this person has dripped his youth.
Oh, to me, the imagery after you explained was more like, to me, the imagery was more of a child. Like if a child is
Oh.
eating and they are smiling, and then
Hmm.
you see a lot of.
Hmm.
But teeth may mean old age specifically because they are very related to.
And matlab, when we are eating the fire, then the candles have become too many. So we are old now.
Hmm. As once I had my
Hot,
hot,
hot
hot
youth.
youth. I ate my youth. It's gone.
I drip the fire from my teeth, just like I drip my hot, hot youth from my teeth.
How does one do that? The imagery does not. The imagery seems to mean a lot because this is the final line. Like, this is what the author wants us to leave with.
I think it's more like maybe not drip my youth from my teeth, but it's just dripping. Like drip the fire as once I had my hot, hot youth. Like I will drip the fire just like I drip my hot, hot youth. Like it drips away from you slowly, slowly.
Hmm. Is it that viscerally this person is eating a cake and dripping it is not very polite or
Right, right.
about eating the cake? Is the poet saying that is it a general statement, or like everyone does it, or is poet saying that my youth specifically was this, where I was not very temperate about spending my youth. I was extremely reckless, and now it's in the past.
I think I get a feeling that it's a general statement because he is talking about society. Like when he's saying in the first paragraph, also, isn't it time to give up this ritual? I get a feeling that he's making a very general statement about humankind because when he says that our savage folk that have few festivals, he's making a general statement about us that we celebrate it because we don't have anything else. So I think the last paragraph also I take it as a general statement, not specific to him.
I probably want to go through this poem again because I understand the last paragraph, and I think this is a small enough poem that I understand it.
I think the great part about this poem is that I think I love all poems which say so much with such simplicity. Because generally people think of poetry, and even when they want to get into poetry, they think of it as something that is very difficult to grasp and that has huge words and random references that you will never get. But poems like these are, I think, the real gems in which they take a very simple thing that everyone can relate to, like even the image, the birthday cake advancing through the room, and they say something so, like, so forceful with such simple words. That's why I think I really like poems like these. But I want to talk about a little bit more about, I think when I had read it, I had actually read it in a book called Real Sophistication by, there's this, what was the author's name actually? Tony Hoagland. So he was analyzing this a little bit. So there is one thing that he said that stayed with me was that he said that a poem has, like, if you don't have any other things particularly to discuss, then we'll start on this one.
I don't. I find the analysis interesting because to me the poem is kind of done, right? Like I see that, but
Right.
as in there are some unanswered questions for me which
Okay.
we can address later. Like for example, there is a lot of repetition I see,
Right.
which and that is one thing I am not sure if it's how
Actually,
useful
he
it is.
talks about it. What you said, that the repetition, for example, here in the first paragraph, the candles on the icing are one too many. 1 2 too many to blow out, too many to count, too many, isn't it time? So he actually talks about it. So if you look at it in a way of, like, way of speech, like who is talking or how the poet's emotions are changing, so he says that in a way the first paragraph is spoken by the child part of him. That is why there is so much repetition, and that is why it's like not very correctly said, like as an adult would say things. It is the child who is insolently crying out, like, isn't it time, isn't it time, there are too many, there are too many, there are too many. And then the second paragraph is kind of spoken by the adult part of him. So that is why it's more organized also as a paragraph, that although the fiery crown fluttering on the chest, so there is no repetition if you see in the second paragraph
And
at all.
it's written very grammatically right, and
Right.
it's very big words are being used.
Big words, grammatically right, the flow of it. So the adult part of him is also the responsible part of him, who is saying responsible things like that, oh, we don't have a lot of festivals, so we will just celebrate it.
There is a silver lining to this.
Yeah, we shouldn't cry about everything, this is good. And then the last paragraph is again something which is the more emotional part of it that is coming out, isn't it time, isn't it time, and so the repetition comes back. So it's like the emotion or the child part of him is trying to come out. He tries to contain it in the second paragraph by being more rational about things, but then he goes back into it in the last paragraph.
So he wants his youth back. He's trying to
Oh.
pacify himself.
That is also a very good point, that why is he talking like a child even though he's an adult, kind of. It's the rage also, if we see that why is there rage in the last paragraph. That is a very good point, that he, because we all do, we want our youth back, right, somehow.
And I surprisingly do connect with this because as we speak, I'm struggling with this. I am
Right.
recently turned. It happened a lot. Like now, it's a year. I'm living with this feeling. I think the second paragraph is the part where it's dominating, but I do feel that you know, ki there's time lost.
Right.
I'm doing the same thing again and again and again, and I have to do a lot of things now before there is no more time.
Right, right. Yes, maybe you should write a poem with that feeling.
I think I can just read.
That's actually a very good way of looking at it, because that's, and now that explains the rage, because I could feel the rage but I couldn't explain that why is there rage, because there is rage in growing older, because you always want it back, that, oh, why is it going away from me.
You seem to be settled in life. You're like, old age suits me.
I think
Rage, I don't connect with this rage.
No,
I understand this.
I think I also want it back. That's why I still look like a child. But one more thing he said, coming back to the analysis of the poem, that he actually talks about. I think this will be more helpful to people who want to write poetry. So he talks about things that make up a poem. So in general, when we talk about a poem, what people mostly talk about first is imagery, that the poem should create a very beautiful image. And he says that imagery is one part of it, yes, and a very important part of it. But then there is also rhetoric, and a lot of people shy away from using rhetoric because they think that rhetoric is not poetry and rhetoric makes everything dry. And so he says that this poem is a very good example of something that uses the he also talked about a third part, but that is not very evident here, so I will not talk about it. So he says that in this poem, rhetoric and image work very well together. So the first paragraph, he says, basically is rhetoric, in the sense that if you see there is not much imagery in the first paragraph at all. In the first paragraph, he's just making a statement. It's just a very simple image that there are candles on the icing. Isn't it time, when the candles are too many, isn't it time to give up this ritual? So in the first paragraph, he's kind of just making a statement, like a judgment kind of thing. In the second paragraph, it's full of images. So the darkened room, the crown, the fluttering, he goes fully into imagery in the second paragraph. Loveliest sight and the savage folk. So he's doing everything to create an image in the second paragraph. That is what pulls us into the world of the poem. So in the first paragraph, there is no world of the poem. The second paragraph, there is a room, there are savage folk in the room, and there is a crown. So in the second paragraph, he employs imagery, and in the third paragraph, he actually combines both, in which he creates the very visceral image of eating the fire, but then he concludes his rhetoric that he made in the first one, that, oh, isn't it time to end this? And instead of eating the cake, we eat the fire.
Very interesting. I didn't even think from this perspective, I guess. Or maybe that is the success of the poem, right? Like,
Right.
I am not trying to see. For example, I don't think rhetoric or imagery means much to me, more of what the poem is able to convey. And now I see that, what you're saying.
It's like you are right. It works so well that you don't consciously think about it, but once you see it, I think, like, for me, a poem becomes more beautiful when I understand its plumbing also.
Hmm.
Okay.
I guess probably I will have to read more poems to even parse it from this perspective, right? Like, because I have not tried to,
Right.
whenever I have tried to write a poem, I have always tried to probably I have always tried to put together an imagery, and I think that is why my poems work the best when I am full of emotions, because then
Right.
the analogies which seem cliche or which seem far-fetched suddenly seem to hold a lot of meaning.
Right. And more power. You put it with more confidence, so you are able to, like, join things together.
Because I'm actually feeling so much that I am able to imagine myself in different scenarios, unfathomable scenarios, and but what you are saying is that one can add rhetoric to
Right.
the equation. But what does rhetoric mean here? Like, is it whenever I am not able to, whenever I'm not in the world of a poem, it becomes rhetoric.
In the sense that rhetoric is more like a quip. Like, for example, I would make a quip at the world that there are people dying and we are sitting in our own desires, a statement which is essentially devoid of an image, but it is more like a philosophical take that I'm taking on life, that kind of a thing. That, and if you his point is basically that a poem has, the best poems will take everything together. So if I just keep making rhetoric that, oh, people are dying and I'm just sitting in my room thinking of my desires and I am such a person, and I just make it full of rhetoric, there is no image, then that poem would be a very bland poem. It would just feel like a rambling more than a poem, actually.
But I'm curious because I can imagine a way where rambling is the point of the poem.
Some poems are entirely rhetoric, actually. He talks about some poets also whose poems are entirely rhetoric. But I think why this poem stayed with me, this was actually in the end of the chapter, and this is the one that stayed with me because I could see, like, I could enjoy it the most because it had everything. It had the world, and it had the judgment, and the rhetoric, and the anger. So
Okay, imagery. So from what I understand, is imagery is essentially you are showing the world, which kind of takes the reader into the world
Right.
and shows the conclusion. Rhetoric is I'm directly telling that.
I'm
I am
directly-
not saying
yes.
ki, oh, live with me and see how I feel.
Yeah,
They are saying
exactly.
is that this is how I feel.
This is how I feel. It is more like reading a philosophy book, let's say. That this is how the world is.
I understand this now a little more.
So, any last words? And I think maybe for today we can say bye. But
I'll say this was a very nice poem to start. In fact, that is, I think, the best part of this poem. There is not a lot to it,
yeah,
but
exactly.
it captures a very specific emotion
Very nice.
that if I am feeling, if I become 35 and I feel again, you know what, I have not traveled a lot, I can go back to this.
Right. That's actually a very good point because even when we are writing, we sometimes think that, oh, we should write so much or we should, like, go from point A to point Z for it to be a good poem. But as you said, this takes, like, it's like a snapshot in time. just one snapshot and saying one thing, but saying it so strongly and so well that it kind of stays with you. That's
Correct, because it has a frustration, but it also has a template. Like the part here is that when I read it, it can become a cautionary tale. Yo, I'm eating fire. But I can imagine a point where I'm like, eating fire is fine. Like it's needed.
it's to take you out of your delusion. Awesome. Okay, let's read it one more time just to close it because it's a great poem. You read it? You read it very well.
Let me read. Now, isn't it time when the candles on the icing are too many to blow out, too many to count, too many? Isn't it time to give up this ritual? Although the fiery crown fluttering on the chocolate and through the darkened room, advancing is still the most loveliest sight among our savage folk that have few festivals. But the thicket is too hot and thick, and isn't it time? Isn't it time where the fires are too many to eat the fire and not the cake, and rip the fires from my teeth as once I had my hot youth?
Hot youth is so great as a large line because it's
Repetition. I
fire.
guess repetition is the best part. Like hot. I don't think
And repetition
I had
in the right places.
exactly. I guess this is where
Like hot youths kind of gives you that feeling of when you say it, oh hot youths, like such hot youths. But then it's hot because it's fire.
correct. Like breaking the grammar here.
Right, suddenly breaking the grammar.
This this poet was very frustrated.
Yes, you can absolutely feel what he was feeling. We can maybe check out when he wrote this poem, and we can see on which birthday, like what 40 years, how many years was
That
he?
may be actually a good
Okay.
research.
Yeah, let's check that out and we will let you know in the comments. And we will see you next time with another poem. Let us know how you think about growing older and how many candles are on your birthday cake right now.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.